Before we can proceed, we need to go back to move parts. And anything that's not swappable, we'll have to place onto the character so that the offsets will be correct. Okay, and then back to animation. You can start a key, hit part options, hide show, and hide anything that you don't want visible. I'm probably going to change this later so you can click a bunch of them at once. So you get the hide show option, which you can use anywhere in the timeline. Don't forget to click on add key every time you make a change. Otherwise, when you scrub the timeline, you lose those changes. There's a help up in the top right hand corner. Alt P, Alt R, Alt S, those are for resetting position, rotation, or size. So if I rotate his head, or rotate part of his head, I can hit Alt R as long as I'm hovered over the right thing. Hit Alt R and it'll return it to normal. If you use Alt V or the middle mouse button, just click it. You can distort in the animation. If you hold Shift while scaling, it'll do a uniform scaling. If you don't, you can do non-uniform scaling. Control Z to undo. If you hold down the left mouse button while you're over something and use minus, hold down the minus, you can change the alpha transparency. The alpha slider in the corner is just for making the entire character disappear slowly. That can come in handy for certain types of special effects animations. In the case of characters, we typically won't use that. If you hold down the letter M, so you can't just hold down right click on this and then use the arrows to move it, because the arrows are linked to changing the depth of that frame. So if you hold M, then use the arrows, you can move it 1 pixel at a time if you need to. To move keyframes, I could move this keyframe by holding down right click, and if I hold down Shift and move it, I'm actually copying it. So the original copy stays here. If you were to hit pick part, and I just want to copy the keyframe for one part, I could say select this, hold down Shift, and drag this over to another frame, and it'll only copy the keyframe for that one part. Part swapping, we can select the head, for example. If it's something that's hard to select though, you can hit pick part first. So click on that. And now when you hit part swap, it'll only let you pick the part you actually want to swap for. So I can change it to this expression. Done. And you'll notice it only changed it for that one frame. If you want it to span, you could hold down Shift, right click, and drag it out to here. But if you had different animation on this keyframe and you only wanted to copy that one keyframe, you could do it that way. Or another way is you could simply click on swap part again, make sure you got the head selected, and change it to another expression. But it won't stay that expression unless we hit part swap again over here and go back to this expression, or continue with the same expression up to this point. So it'll continue that expression, and then it'll continue it to here, and then it'll go back to the regular expression. I'll use this minus key to delete. Something to remember when you're playing an animation and you stop it in the middle of an animation, it's not on a snapped key, even though snap is turned on. So you got to move it first, then add your key. If you don't, it could be at some odd frame like 357 or something. In order to get to that specific frame, you'll have to turn snap off and then use the left and right arrows to get to that exact key. Turn snap back on. So I guess we could start by making an idle animation. You can grab a hold of the part as long as it's not over top of this. If it's over this, you'll get those arrows. That means you can move it. If it's just the green rectangle, then you can hold on it and you can rotate it. So we'll rotate his arm down to here, and I'm going to change this so it's back here. We didn't set the depth correctly for this hand apparently. So if I grab this hand, oh, it must be just that keyframe. So we must have used the arrow keys by accident when we were over that frame and it changed the depth. You can hit the down arrow to get it to the depth that you want. And always test out your character's body motions on the first keyframe to make sure all the depths are going to be correct. Push this one back a couple more. Oh, it's still going behind the leg. So I'm using the down arrow to change the layer depth. Okay, that side works. And we'll do this leg. And I'll show you how to do this so that these don't distort, so that these don't shear. For example, if I turn his foot like this, I can middle click and you can match up both sets. So I can match up this set here, click done, and then match up this set here. And let's just make sure this is working right. Okay, it'll never go down that far, so I'm not worried about that. Okay, everything seems to be okay. So make sure to key that first keyframe, and we'll just get a very neutral pose here first. You can use the middle mouse to rotate too. Okay, that's a fairly neutral pose. And we can copy that to other keyframes by copying poses. To make him breathe, we'll middle click on his body. I'll just hit pick part, middle click, make his chest inflate a little bit, rise up a bit, and I'll hit key just so I don't lose that. Done. Let's make this match up a bit better. It's good to get into the habit of hitting the add keyframe every time you change something, just in case you change the timeline and you forget. So now you can see he kind of breathes. And we'll turn loop on so we can watch the animation loop. There's a speed adjuster here too, and that'll be adjustable in the game too. So if you change your mind later, you can always adjust it by changing the speed variable. For an idle, let's make it so that his body kind of heaves a little bit up and down. Put a little bit of life into it, pick apart. Grab the standard head, we'll hold M and just tap up a couple times, maybe forward once, and then we'll grab the body, hold M, tap up on it, and then each leg or each thigh we'll tap down on it once to put it back to where it was. So it kind of has that subtle motion. And we'll make his arms move a little bit. Maybe they go down a tiny bit as his body rises up. We'll key that and see how that looks. We'll go back to that middle key. I'm just going to adjust these a tiny bit. I can use the magnify too for that. Should be good there. Okay, toy it around with the pose a little bit. If it's an idle and it looks fairly good on a faster speed, you know it'll look a lot better on the regular speed. So as his head goes up, I'd expect his ears to be pushing down a little bit. Let's grab this and rotate it down a tiny bit. Same with that one, a little bit of stretch to it. Somewhere around here. Actually, let's move that. There, it looks better. And let's make this on the back of his head breathe. And I'll just use these two keyframes again. So at this frame, I'm going to have it bulge out in the middle. Now you notice something, that because this frame's here, it's not going to gradually blend from here to here. What we can do, shift right click on the first keyframe, drag it to the last one here, and then for this one, we want that part to blend from this frame to this frame. So click Tools, Key Blend for a part. You can do multiple parts too. Hold Control to select multiple parts. I'm just going to click the one part, and then from this key all the way to this key, and it'll smoothly blend over those keys. There, that's better. Change the speed. So we'll have this animation, then we'll have another one where he blinks or makes an expression as the second idle. So we'll change the name of this one to idle 1. We could call the next one blink, but I'm just going to call it idle 2. So what we can do, we can copy the entire animation, go to the next animation, we'll call it idle 2, Tools, Paste Animation. I was supposed to change the name there to idle 2. Let's make him so he blinks in this one. Since idle 2 will have blinking, let's go to the third section here and we'll use hide show and we'll begin blinking. Click to keyframe and then we'll finish the blink on this frame. Hide show. This frame he'll be opening his eyes up again, and on this one they should be completely open. So we'll have to hide the blinking. So that blinking's a little slow. Use right click and bring these keyframes closer together. And we'll put a keyframe here by going hide show. So by adding an extra keyframe here where we've marked it so that these are all hidden, now it does the blinking correctly. If you go to the bottom right hand side here, down arrow will bring you to animation 0, which is idle. Animation 1 is idle 2, which is the blink. We're going to start animation 2, which is the third animation. Change the name of it to, we'll do a run animation. Normally I'd do a walk and a run because they're a little tiny bit different, and I'd have the two animations blend together, but we can speed them up into a run and it should look close enough to a walk, so it should be fine. Okay, and if we want, we can go to the first keyframe of one of the other animations, use Tools, Copy Pose, and we can paste that pose into here. Okay, so for the run, I think what we'll do is we'll grab a background using tools, backgrounds, import background, and we'll look for a running animation sequence, run cycle that we can use as a reference. And you can usually find those on the internet. So let's import. Okay, this isn't the greatest reference, but it is a pretty common reference used by a lot of animators when they first start. We can get a general idea of how to set up the animation from this, and then we can give a little more style after. So I'm just going to use this run one down here as a reference, scale it up a little more. If you want it facing the other way, you can actually scale it the other way if your character is backwards. So we'll start with this pose. Let's tilt him forward a bit, and we'll hold M and move his gaze up a little bit so he's looking more forward. Maybe Shift B to grab the background, move it over to this first one, click done, and we'll just match up this pose. I don't want to exaggerate the run animation too much, so I'll tone it down a little bit. And for now, I'm not really worried about the shearing. I can fix that up after, like that sort of thing. You can always hit reset to get it back to what it was before animating it. And at first the animation won't look right, but as you work on it, it'll progressively look better and better. Just keep scrubbing the timeline and watching how he moves. And if it doesn't look right, just make adjustments as you go, and eventually it will. And his entire body should move up and down too as he walks and runs. So we'll have to move the root bone when he's up in the air. Hold M. We'll go up about 6 and key that. Means this one should be up about 3. Okay, and then I'll just keep going until we got something that looks like this, and then we'll tweak it. Okay, so primarily there are 4 frames we're concerned with. The first standing frame, where all his weight is on his right foot, and the hands are kind of in a neutral position. Since this foot is back slightly, this hand is forward slightly, and I'm kind of using this guy's head in the background as a reference as to where he would be standing, and he pushes off from that. So the second frame to consider after you do this one is the middle one. Should be about the same height. The foot should be kind of standing on that spot, and the other leg is down and the other leg is up now. So then you do the ones in between, number 2 and number 6. And that's where the legs are the furthest apart and the arms are the furthest apart. The arms are the opposite directions of the same side. So the leg on the right side is back and the hand on the right side is forward. Same sort of idea with the back. And then you do the opposite for frame 6. From 0 to 2, whole body needs height. So you can use pick part, grab the body, hold M, and then count how many times you tap up, and do the same thing for the other keyframe where he's up in the air. So you just want to make sure his body's at the same height for both keys. And then I add these intermediate ones to kind of patch up certain parts. Like if I don't like the way his foot looks like it's pushing off, I might add an extra keyframe there. And the other thing that you might be fixing up is if there's any shearing anywhere, or anywhere where you'd want to distort parts of the foot, like make his foot look like it's angling and sort of in 3D here, just by changing the vertices. So like right here, oops, I still have it on pick part. Right here, I've done this to sort of give it perspective and kind of create a bit of a 3D illusion, like his foot's facing forward more. And this run animation would work better probably if I had a more side view version of the character, but for our purposes this is fine. So it's a slow version. We'll speed it up and see how it looks. So obviously there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made still. His belly and his ears don't move in accordance to how they should based on how he's moving. So that would have to be fixed. Something like hair or ears, while he starts to go up, or I guess about halfway going up and towards the top of his altitude, it would seem like they would be getting pulled back down, when all it really is his body's going up and the ears are trying to, or the ears or the hair are trying to catch up to it. And then when you're coming down, they're trailing behind, so the ears would kind of stretch upward, or if it's hair, it would kind of go upward. And the same thing with any soft materials, clothes, a belly or whatever. Same sort of principle applies. Might even want to do it with the edges of his eyes just a tiny bit, or this part back here. So it gives a little bit more life if things move around a little bit more organically. For certain kinds of animations, he's jumping or doing an action where he has to focus in a certain direction. You don't want to move the eyes so that they're looking in the direction of what he's going to be doing. You may notice that while he's running, he comes right off the ground. When he slows down in the game, though, it's not going to make sense for him to be floating in the air. So this particular animation doesn't work the greatest for a character that speeds up and slows down. So what you can do is switch between a walk and a run. So I went ahead and made this walk animation using the same technique where I start with one leg down, go to the middle frame, and I pose the other leg down with the arms kind of straight up and down. And then I go to the in-betweens, which would be 2 and 6, where his legs are apart the most and his arms are the opposite, apart the most. And then after that, I'd go in between 0 and 2 to make sure the leg stays bent as it goes forward. And same thing between 4 and 6, make sure the leg is staying bent as it goes forward. Any of these other keys, I'm just kind of tweaking some of the vertices for the distortions so that everything kind of looks good. Like if you watch in the ears, I added a little extra motion on frame 7, 3, so that they kind of wobble a bit as he moves. I might have made this back part wobble a bit too much, but and another trick that you can do, I've actually tried it before, is as he walks, if you want him to go into a run, but you want the transition to be gradual, you can do a linear interpolation between your rotations, offsets, and positions for the corresponding frames between your walk animation and your run animation. And those kind of animation blendings work as long as you have the same amount of frames. So it would do the animation for the run and the animation for the walk. And then at each time value, it would do a linear interpolation between the resulting offsets and positions and rotations. So as you speed up, he would go from a walk into a run quite gradually and quite naturally. You could even go from an idle to a walk as long as there's the same number of frames. And it'll look like a gradual going from sort of an idle motion to the beginning of a walk and then into a full walk, and then gradually moving into a run as he speeds up. And you do the same thing in reverse when he slows down. So we'll go to one of these earlier animations and go to a first keyframe, and we'll copy the pose so that when we start a new animation, we can paste that pose. And we could do something like a jump or a duck animation, and you can find references for figuring out how to do that.